This week, we are talking about the week in space from December 30th, 2024 to January the 5th of 2025. And yeah, this is the end of 2024, the last gasp of the old year and the beginning of the new year. So sort of shifting of the guards. This maybe doesn't have anything to do with astrology, right? This is terrestrial time. This is the calendar that we have developed, and we have sort of chosen this arbitrary moment. January 1st, that's when it'll begin. I personally think that the astrological new year begins at the spring equinox when the sun ingresses into Aries. But, collectively, we have this agreement, right? Consensus reality is that the new year starts on January 1st. And so here we are at the end of the old and the beginning of the new. Pretty exciting stuff. 2025 is gonna be off the chain, as they say. We have Neptune moving into Aries. We have Saturn moving into Aries. We have Pluto continuing to consolidate power or unveiling the shadow in Aquarius. We're going to have Jupiter moving into Cancer, a sign of exaltation. We're also going to have Uranus moving into Gemini. A whole lot of stuff shifting in space. And fortunately, if you are interested in learning more, I'm doing a deep dive into 2025 with the brilliant astrologers Sam Reynolds and Lindsey Turner. Unfortunately, Michael Bartlett had to bow out and he will be missed, but I think he will be there in spirit. And yeah, if you are interested in checking out what's like all of the astro weather for 2025 in a pretty concise overview from three pretty entertaining and brilliant astrologers, check us out. It's a deep dive into 2025. I just made a post about it. I'll put a link to sign up in the show notes on YouTube, and I'll throw something in my stories, but you can check the link in my bio to sign up for that. Hi, Gina Maria. Good morning, and good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jeff. So without further ado, let's talk about the astrology of this week. Starting off today, Monday, December the 30th, with a new moon in Capricorn. This is occurring at 9 degrees and 44 arc minutes of Capricorn. Oh, also, before I like really get into it, I came down with a pretty gnarly cold over the last week, which is why I wasn't able to put out my Christmas edition of the Melee Report. So I apologize for the people who've been sending me Christmas music. Right after this report, I came down with something pretty gnarly, and I've been in bed for about a week. But I'm starting to come out of it, and my energy levels are pretty low. I'm going to do the best that I can today. Just wanted to put that out there as a little disclaimer in the beginning. Okay, so new moon in Capricorn at 9 degrees and 44 arc minutes of the cardinal Earth sign of Capricorn. A new moon occurs when we have a sun-moon conjunction. This is happening in cardinal Earth, right? And cardinal Earth is about like establishing physical structures, right? What are the facts? What are the parameters? Just the facts, ma'am, right? What am I working with? What is this thing, right? It's approaching the world as it is and recognizing what is solid and in the present moment, right? It's like holding something in your hand and being like, what is this, right? What can I do with it? Can I eat it? Can I exchange it? Right? What is the use value of this thing? Can I make something with it? Right? And so, um, with a new moon, it's a time of intention setting, right? It is a seed that is being planted for a lunar cycle. And right now, this new moon is occurring like 2 days before the new year. So this is an opportune time for setting intentions, right? Not just for this lunar cycle, but maybe considering what are the intentions for the new year? And again, January 1st is sort of an arbitrary moment in time. However, it has collective power. I don't really believe in resolutions because I don't think that they work. It's sort of like, oh, I'm gonna on this random day, I'm gonna start doing this thing and do that for a year, or I'm gonna stop doing this thing and stop doing that for a year. I don't think that really works. However, we can really begin to cultivate and set intention about what is the direction that we want to go in, right? What is the way that we want to move into this new year, and how do we want to show up in our lives, and for our goals. And Capricorn is very much about being like, there's a mountain, I'm going to climb it, right? And the sort of the work around Capricorn is recognizing, is this the right mountain for me? And also, like, what does it take to climb this mountain, right? And so this is an opportunity with this new moon, and again, moving into this sort of shift of time to really consider, what are the goals that I want to set for myself, right? And are these the right goals for me, right? Are they attainable? Are they, something that will support me in the longer term, right? If we're thinking beyond a lunar cycle in a single year, will this, support me for the next Saturn cycle, right? Which could be 2.5 years, which is how long Saturn spends in a sign, right? Could be 7 years, which is how long Saturn spends in a quarter, etc. Oh, excuse me. And then the other thing that I think is really important with Capricorn is thinking about, like, what are the structures that are going to help me to climb this mountain, right? To achieve my goals. What can I do that can, what are the sort of scaffolding, right? And that's the maybe Saturnian part of Capricorn, is the scaffolding, the structures, the bones that help to support these longer term goals, right? So if you're going to climb a mountain, are you just going to like go run up there? Probably not, right? You want supplies, maybe a group of homies to do it with, right? Maybe some equipment, maybe you want to do some training depending on the mountain that you're trying to climb. So really, like, one of the ways that we can think about setting intention at this time is really thinking about what our goals might be, and then what are the things that are going to help us to achieve our goals, and knowing that we don't need to do it all at once, right? But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And so also thinking about, what is the smallest possible thing that I can do to move towards this goal. Excuse me. So anyway, that's just my little introduction with the new moon in Capricorn that's occurring today, Monday, December the 30th, and this will be exact at 2:26 p.m. Pacific time, making that 5:26 p.m. Eastern time. And so the other thing to consider is, as we are moving to that sort of perfected point of the sun's conjunction with the moon, as we were moving towards that, that is still the waning phase of the moon, right? As we are squeezing out the last little bits of light, right? So this is a time for shedding and making space. And then once that conjunction occurs and things begin to build, and ever so slowly, minute by minute and moment by moment, shifting from the waning to the waxing, from the out breath to the in breath, right? That's when we start sort of building our intention, right? And cultivating our intention. So really thinking about, what is like the right mountain for you? What is the goals that you are trying to set? And again, the structures that you can begin weaving around that and implementing around that to help support you in achieving your goals. Okay, so moving on to Tuesday, December 31st, New Year's Eve. So we have Mercury in Sagittarius trine Chiron in Aries at 19 degrees. This is pretty exact at 19 degrees. And so this is a fire trine, and a trine is a harmonious, supportive aspect. So Chiron just stationed direct last week at 19 degrees Aries. And again, this is the exact degree of the total solar eclipse that we had back in April of 2024. And so Chiron is like really holding it down on this eclipse point, and that eclipse was a conjunct Chiron as well. I believe Chiron was at about 18 degrees of Aries at that time, right? And so I think that there is stuff that was coming up during that eclipse that Chiron is continuing to hold on to, right? To work with, to make medicine out of. So again, as we like feel into Chiron, we can feel into what was going on back in April. And this is about the time that Beyonce's Cowboy Carter album dropped. That's the only way that I remember it because I had that on repeat. Um, and so I think that there's maybe like some wounds or rifts or shifts or things that came up during that time that Chiron is still working with and that are being continually reactivated through Chiron passing over that point and then also stationing direct on that point. And then being trined by Mercury. Mercury is the messenger, right? They create exchange between our conscious and our unconscious mind, right? Um, and they help us to process and metabolize the information that we are gathering with our senses. So Chiron deals with the wound, right? And one of the ways that we can think about this, Chiron is the wounded healer, right? And the core wound of being a spiritual being having a human experience, right? And I think this is maybe at the heart of some of the Chiron archetype, right? Is the wound of incarnation. And according to Darby Costello, Chiron represents the gap between our earth self and our spirit self. And in this separation between our earth and spirit selves, we find this wound, right? And so the spirit understands one reality of potential and interconnectedness, right? And the physical self, the earth body, understands a different reality, which includes sickness, suffering, and death, or what the Buddha called dukkha, right, which is the root of suffering. Chiron's core wound comes from this incarnation, right? And how do we bridge these things, right? How do we hold the infinite potential of the spirit with the limitation of physical reality? This is also Saturn's parentage of Chiron, right? Chiron is Saturn's child, um, right? And the sort of limitation of Saturn that Chiron is holding on to, while also being held in, right? While also believing in the sort of infinite potential of everything, right? Of the spirit self that sees the harmony and the interconnectedness that sometimes we can't reach to, and that separation is very painful. And that's my experience of it. So in fire signs, Chiron's wound lies between the image or vision of reality, how it could be, and the actions that we take, right? How this image or vision stirs us to act and churns fears of action, right? Chiron is like, oh, I need to do something. We're like, oh, I need to do something. I see something. I am motivated. I am moved by the spirit. I need to act. And Chiron's like, oh, if I act, I'll get hurt, right? And so we are called to act, to dare, and to be brave, but acting opens up that wound. So in Aries, Chiron is called towards this action, but we might not know how to act, or we might be afraid to act, right? Past wounds and feelings of shame or abandonment may prevent us from taking the actions that can help us to heal or at least be with that wounded part of ourselves. We might find ourselves wallowing or sitting in our suffering and not realizing there is another choice. Right. So Mercury's trying to Chiron here helps us to mediate the distance between that physical and spiritual self, right? Mercury is the messenger and the psychopomp, right? So they mediate that liminal space, and Mercury occupies liminal space. We can only see them at dawn and dusk, right? So in these liminal spaces. And so Mercury is quite adept at being like, oh, there's like this gap there. And Chiron's like, oh, it hurts. And Mercury's like, I live there. Right. Um, yeah, Jeff is pointing out that Chiron is in Aries the longest and Libra the shortest because of their elliptical orbit. And one of the things that I've heard is Chiron is a visitor into our solar system, right? That they've come to sort of help us to heal and help us to grow and metabolize that separation between the earth body and the spirit self. And then when that work is done, they're going to sort of elliptically orbit their way out of here. So Mercury is the psychopomp, right? And they are able to sort of help navigate that gap, that distance, that separation. And they can help create connection in forms of exchange. Mercury in Sagittarius, where Mercury is currently starting to or moving direct, is familiar with the centaur. Chiron is a centaur, right? That half human, half horse archetype. We have top down logical, right, human brain, right, and bottom up intuitive animal body, right? And Mercury can help close that gap, can allow access to information or healing images that help us to integrate these disparate parts of the self. It can provide access to the unconscious information, right, that is coming from the animal body. And it is Chiron is wounded in the thigh in the myth, right, which is in the horse part of Chiron. And so, I think we can also think about that as the intuitive part, the animal part, the unconscious part, right? And so Mercury can provide access to that unconscious information and help us to integrate it into our conscious world, right? It can allow access to healing images, right, that help us to integrate these disparate parts of the self because the sort of right brain intuitive speaks in images, it speaks in symbols. And this is one of the reasons that astrology is great because it is a symbolic language that helps us to really access our right brain, our intuitive, that sort of horse part of the centaur, right? So Chiron might be stuck longing for what should be and resenting what actually is. And Mercury may provide information or understanding that allows us to be with what is. Mercury also may provide information that helps us to take action, even if we are afraid. The medicine for Chiron and Aries is courage and the ability to take small, brave acts, right? However, this doesn't mean like leaping without looking. That's not actual bravery, right? This means developing the courage to lean into what we fear and to practice this in small ways. Mercury can be the guide here. We can notice when we feel that pang of fear, and that is Mercury providing us with information. Now, Chiron can practice being brave and taking these small steps towards the fear and running to and moving into the danger, leaning into the fear to cultivate bravery. So, something that you can practice, right, is think of something that you have some fear around. Nothing big, right? Something small, right? We don't want to get dysregulated, right? And 11 in the morning on a Monday, right? And I mean, Monday morning, right? That's something that creates fear for people. This report creates fear for me when I think about doing it, right? Going to the grocery store is another one for me where I'm like, oh God, I really don't want to do that and interact with all those people. Or like another one is talking to my landlords, which I have to do later today, right? And that activates some survival fears for me, right? Around housing insecurity. And I have Chiron conjunct my moon, right? And so we can think about something that creates a little bit of fear and just notice that pang of fear, right? That little like, right? And then we can take a moment to sort of like put a hand on our heart or on our belly on the vagus nerve, right, which gets tensed up, right, goes into fight or flight, right, gets ready for action. And we can just sort of soothe ourselves a little bit, noticing, okay, like that's a place. And then we can think about what are the things that I can do to lean into that? What is the smallest possible thing that I can do to support myself, right? So that I can lean into that fear place, right? What are the things that could help me go to the grocery store, right? Writing a list or like, do I want to take like a power object with me, right? Or, when I go to my landlords, I might bring like one of the things like you know, might bring this dude with me, right, to help me feel a little bit supported as I lean into this thing that's not like super big, right? But there's some fear there. And as we do this, and as we lean into this fear, and as we move through it, it builds courage, it builds resilience, right? And it tells us, oh, I like went through that thing. That was scary for any number of reasons, and I made it through. And I think this is some of the medicine that Chiron is learning in Aries. And again, if we think way back to April when the Cowboy Carter dropped, right? And we think about that total solar eclipse in Aries, and we can think about maybe sitting there in the beginning of April of 2024 and thinking about all the things that we might have been afraid would happen and all the stuff that we were uncomfortable with, that we didn't know what was going to happen or how we were going to deal with it, right? How things were going to unfold and the fears that we might have been holding at that time. And then we can think about, where we are now, and we've come through that, right? We have come through most of those fears. In some cases, the worst has happened, and we're still here. We're still alive. We're still functioning. We are still in community. We are still in connection, and so we can also think about that, right? And help update our systems like, oh, I was really afraid of that. And that actually happened and it didn't kill me, and I made it through and I'm still making it through. So I think that is some of the support that Mercury brings, and Mercury's magical ability to help Chiron to develop the medicine that helps to heal the wound and close that gap between the spirit and the earth self. Which brings us to January 1st. Happy New Year! That's it. Nothing's happening on that day. I'm not doing anything. You shouldn't do anything either. I hope you have a very relaxing New Year's Day. Take it real easy. 2025 is going to be pretty intense. So relax where you can. On Thursday, January the 2nd, Mercury leaves their shadow. This occurs at 22 degrees and 40 arc minutes of Sagittarius. So Mercury stationed retrograde back on November the 25th at 22 degrees, 40 arc minutes of sorry. Mercury stationed retrograde on the 25th, yes, at 22 degrees and 40 arc minutes of Sagittarius. All right. Mercury stationed direct on December the 15th at 6 degrees and 23 arc minutes of Sagittarius. And so Mercury has finally retraced their steps and come back to where it all started way back when at the end of November. So this is a good time to reflect on what information may have emerged from our unconscious minds during the retrograde. Now we get to integrate all of this information into our conscious awareness as we move forward into new territory, right? So, the retrograde, I think, is very much about, slowing things down, breaking routines, the best laid plans falling apart. And what that does is sort of opens up the space for the unconscious mind to be a little bit more available, right? And in the retrograde, we get to sort of sit in that unconscious and integrate the unconscious imagery, the unconscious awareness into the attention of the conscious mind. So this is also a process of kind of rethinking, right? Redoing, reconsidering, reimagining, reconnoitering. Mercury's retrograde in Sagittarius, I think, has been a lot about rethinking truth, right? And really rethinking what things mean. Sagittarius is about truth and philosophy, right? This is my philosophy. This is what I believe about the world. This is what I think is true, right? And then the retrograde happens and it's like, is that true? Right? Are aliens among us? Right? Hold on one second. I have to like revise my philosophy now, right? And so you know, uh this process has been I think a lot of information coming to light during the retrograde, and really having to sort it out and being like, is this true or is that important, right? What's important? Um, and this is maybe less about like what's capital T true for everybody, but like more about what is true to me, right? What is in alignment with my truth as I am moving through the world? And is my truth still true for me, or does it need to be reconsidered or reoriented in some way? And I also think that this retrograde has been about rethinking what target we are aiming at, right? The Sagittarius is the archer, right? Bing. All right, so what target are we aiming at and where are we pointing our arrows? What is important and what is meaningful, right? Where do I want to shoot my arrow? What is meaningful enough for me to shoot my arrow at? Right. And also, if we are, so fixated on hitting the target, we might forget about the actual like mechanics of archery, the breath, right? The posture, right? And so we may have to, or we may have been rethinking like, okay, like I'm so focused on that target, but am I losing some of the ability to actually perform the task through my kind of narrow-minded focus on like what I think it's supposed to be, right? And I think, the consideration of what is important and what is meaningful is also can be considered as what is true and what is true for me. And so I think this has been a process of rethinking what that truth can look like, right? So also on Thursday, January the 2nd, Venus enters Pisces, which is a sign of Venus's exaltation. Venus is in Pisces until February 4th. So when a planet is exalted, they are said to be raised up high, right? They are like an honored house guest, right? So everybody in Pisces is like, oh my God, Venus is coming to town. Like, oh, I can't wait to show them this thing that I made, right? Oh, we're gonna get out the best wine and like the finest fabrics, right? They sort of pull out all the stops, right? A planet is in exaltation is a place where it is celebrated. Right? Pisces is a Jupiter ruled sign that occurs right before the spring equinox at a time of year when things are just re-emerging from winter and things are returning to life. Is it, excuse me. Still getting over this cold. So this is a time when the sap begins to flow, right? And things start to bud and life comes back. This is a sensuous time, and sensuality is very Venusian through and through. And so when Venus is exalted, right, Venus's significations also become raised up. So the things that Venus brings become more appreciated. Venus has more of an ability to get things done, having the support of exaltation and a sympathetic host. Right. So things like socializing, romantic engagements, creativity, sensuality, relationships, values. These are all Venusian significations that may receive the good fortune of being in exaltation. Right. And these may be valued in new ways while Venus moves through Jupiter's nocturnal sign of Pisces. Jupiter is a planet of increase, and so the things that Venus loves have the ability to be increased in Pisces, which is nice, right? Venus loves nice things, right? Especially things that fit in with the Piscean significations like mystery, fantasy, dream, spirituality. These are all Piscean qualities, um, right? That like where the Pisces Venus Venn diagram overlaps, they can be sort of raised up, right, or increased. There are also Piscean qualities of dissolving or melting, right? In relationship and in connection, these can be very erotic and very Venusian. Right? There's also this deep soulful quality to Pisces, as well as the sort of tragic romantic. There can be the desire for that deep, unbounded, connection mixed with this sense of like tragic sorrow when that level of depth can't be accessed or attained. And I think that is a very kind of Piscean thing. right? The longing for this, like, merging or oneness that we can never really attain, which leaves that the feeling of like, oh, like, the romantic longing, right? The writing long poetry. Oh, right? All these qualities can be raised up in Pisces and expanded by Jupiter's rulership of this sign. So the ability for Venus to carry out their agenda is proportionate to Jupiter's ability to resource Venus while she is a guest in Jupiter's sign. However, Jupiter's having kind of a rough go of it in detriment in Gemini. I don't know if you've noticed, but all year there have been splitting of groups, division in systems, information overloads, and an inability to make coherent sense of situations. And as soon as we do, new information comes to light and shifts the situation. Right. This is Jupiter in Gemini and just trying to make order out of chaos. And that's a pretty full-time job, which means that Jupiter doesn't have the surplus energy to resource his honored guest, or to throw them the lavish parties that Venus is accustomed to. This doesn't mean that Venus is incapable of doing what feels good, but they may have to work a little harder, which is where we come in, right? Check this out. There's like this idea that like planets are making things happen to us, right? Or making us do things, or that like they're, sort of puppeting us around. And I don't really buy into that. I believe that we are co-creating with these archetypal energies. And we can lend support to the planets through our energy and attention to help them to achieve their goals. And so Venus in Pisces is supporting life through joy, sensuality, creativity, and social connection. We can be in alignment with this energy by cultivating these Venusian qualities in our own life, right? Spending time with friends, experiencing beauty, practicing creativity, engaging in sensual activities. Right? And this does not necessarily mean like hooking up or having sex, but doing things that delight the senses, which make us feel alive, right? That bring us joy. These are ways that we can support Venus in their movement through Pisces, right? By engaging in these activities consciously, right? In a kind of devotional way, and being like, Venus, right? I'm taking myself to an art gallery and looking at beautiful things, and this one's for you. Or noticing something beautiful and sharing it with the Venusian archetype, right? And these are ways in which we can take advantage of Venus in exaltation, and also ways that we can support that energy, right? And sort of put our energy into the reservoir of Venus and exaltation, right? So that we can also receive back from that. Right? And so, um, and yeah, Gina Maria saying order out of chaos makes me think of a Speaker of the House. Yeah, and I think that is a very kind of Jupiterian archetype, the Speaker of the House, right? Because Jupiter is about justice and order, right? The sort of ideal, the vision of like a functioning democracy, right, is a Jupiterian concept, right? And the kind of structures that we put in place that help us to live out our philosophy of how things should be, right? And I think the sort of person at the head of that system is a Jupiterian archetype. Okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, not bad. All right, so Friday, January the 3rd. And this is probably the last transit that I'm going to talk about today. We have, hold on Saturday the 4th, which again is my year ahead talk with Sam Reynolds and Lindsey Turner, which I hope everybody comes to because it's going to be great. Um, and anyway, I'll talk about that in a minute. But on Saturday, January the 4th, we have the Sun in Capricorn, sextile Saturn in Pisces. Um, if there's enough time, I'll touch on that for a minute. But right now, I want to talk about kind of the big transit that we're getting this week. And again, all of this is like kind of activated in the new moon chart for today. But Friday, January the 3rd, we have Mars retrograde in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. This is going down at 1 degree and 8 arc minutes of these fixed signs. This is the second of three oppositions. The last one was back on November the 3rd at 29 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn. We had Mars at moving direct at 29 Cancer and Pluto direct at 29 Capricorn, just about a week or so, 2 weeks before Pluto moved into Aquarius. And so the last time, and this is, pretty big. This is going on for quite a while now. And last time Mars was in their fall in Cancer and at the anaretic degree, and now Mars is retrograde, but in Leo, where they are slightly better positioned, or I'd say much better positioned, being not being in fall, even though Mars will move back into Cancer pretty shortly. Uh, Pluto is also in a different sign, right? So we have this opposition occurring, but occurring for a second time, but shifting signs. So it's bringing a whole different flavor, right? From cardinal to fixed, right? Pluto represents the unconscious and specifically unconscious survival drives. Mars represents action, anger, aggression, will to power. The last time we had this opposition was right before the US presidential election, right? And I think this was one of the aspects that was sort of pretty charged around the election. And I remember the tension that was building up at that time, right? When when these planets are in tense aspects like squares or oppositions, they can result in eruptions. And I like to think about Pluto as the kind of unconscious magma under the surface, right, of our consciousness, or the lava under the surface of the Earth. Mars is like an action that creates an eruption, right? And when there's too much pent up energy, right? In the lava fields of the unconscious, Mars can come in and create an explosion, an eruption, right? So all that sort of power of magma and lava forces its way from the unconscious into the consciousness, right? During the November opposition, we didn't see any major eruptions of political violence in the US, which is something that I was afraid was going to happen with this transit. However, the election was an eruption in its own right. Forces that had been building under the surface erupted and opened the way for what might be large-scale transformation, the US political system. Right. We don't know what's going to happen yet. I have fears and I also have doubts, right? We also see plutocrats, right, and oligarchs, right, which are Plutonian figures, starting to emerge and claim political power, which is pretty frightening, right? However, with this opposition that we are receiving this week, we see a different type of eruption occurring. There's like a MAGA civil war erupting over H-1B visas that give green cards for foreign tech workers. And so we have the isolationist and racist sector of MAGA saying reduce these visas and provide more tech jobs to American workers. And people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are saying that Americans are basically too mediocre and lazy to do these jobs well, and they need foreign workers. This is most likely because foreign workers are tied to these temporary visas and are much easier to exploit. But the tech bro MAGAs are pissing off the good old boy MAGAs, creating kind of an eruption in the party. And I think this is also due to the fragmenting and splitting qualities of Jupiter and Gemini, but Mars Pluto is showing up to the fire with a can of gasoline. And remember, Mars like really inflames things. That's one of Mars's qualities, right? One of Mars's good qualities. And so Mars and Pluto are both about power. And we can maybe think about power as the ability to do what one wants despite resistance. Pluto functions as power to exert coercive control through brute force or other kinds of violence and aggression. Mars exerts power through the will to act. In the Pluto-Mars opposition, we can conceptualize it as the opposition of different forms of power. Pluto is the power of the unconscious and the underworld. Mars is the power of the will and the power to act. And so there's this Mesopotamian myth about Nergal, the god of war, pestilence, and death, right? Who is syncretized with Mars. Um, and Nergal represents a very particular aspect of death, one that is often interpreted as inflicted death. Uh, is not death by natural causes, but like through war, or famine, or pestilence. Um, is yeah. In this myth, he goes to the underworld and meets Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, who is a pretty Plutonic figure. And you may remember Ereshkigal from such Mesopotamian myths as the descent of Inanna. And this is a different descent myth. And I think this myth is pretty timely, not just because of the Mars-Pluto opposition, but because Mars is in retrograde, which is also a time of descent and initiation. Pluto also associated with initiation. And the retrograde process is a descent and an initiation process. So, y'all ready for story time? All right. So the gods are having a feast, and Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, can't go because she can't leave the underworld. She, never gets to go to any parties. She just always has to hang out in the land of the dead. However, they honor her by providing a portion of the feast, and she sends her vizier Namtar to collect her portion of the feast. Namtar means fate, right? And is the god of fate. And so when Namtar arrives, all of the gods stand to show respect for Reshkigal in the land of Kur, land of the dead, or the land of no return. However, Nergal, the fiery god of war, remains seated and doesn't stand. So Namtar is incredibly offended and goes back and tells Ereshkigal that of Nergal's disrespect. And so I think an interesting thing to consider is Nergal offends Namtar, which we could say that Nergal was disrespectful to fate, right? And there's a piece of fate in Pluto in that we all go to the underworld eventually. Like Pluto is fated, like you will meet Hades, you will go to the underworld. There's nothing that you can do about it. However, Nergal is like, whatever, right? And is disrespectful to that fate. Mars or Nergal may feel like they don't need to meet or honor their fate, right? That they are not obligated to respect what is inevitable. And this is the Mars will to act, right? Oh, I can change fate, right? Or I don't need to do this because, like, whatever, right? I'll fight my way out. So Namtar goes back to the underworld and tells Ereshkigal of this disrespect. She demands that Nergal be sent to the underworld to apologize. And really, Ereshkigal has a plan to kill him and trap him there and hold him in the underworld for eternity. The gods agree that Nergal must make things right. Enki, the wise god of magic, who may be like pulling the strings on this whole situation behind the scenes, um, gives Nergal an entourage of 14 demons to keep him safe on his journey to the underworld. He tells him not to eat anything or drink anything, and no matter what, do not do what men and women do together. All right, Nergal is like, whatever, bro, don't be gross. I'll smell you later, and goes down to the underworld with his 14 demons. As Nergal passes through each of the seven gates going down to Kur, he leaves two demons at each gate to hold the gates open. As you pass through, they close behind you. It's the land of no return. But he stations two demons at each gate so that they can hold the gates open for him. Um, and so Nurgle going down into the underworld is about an initiation. And again, Pluto, played by Ereshkigal here, is about initiation. Right? It consumes and composts us. And in this process, we are transformed and initiated into a different awareness, a different way of being, a different way of living. So Nergal arrives in the underworld, and in one version of the story, he overpowers Ereshkigal, and to save her life, Ereshkigal offers to share her throne. The version that I like better, Nergal gets there and he's pissed, right? And they offer him food and he refuses, and they offer him drink and he refuses, right? He just sits there and he's like, "Fine, I'm here," right? And Ereshkigal's like, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna go take a bath," right? And she starts undressing, right? And he looks over and he sees her undressing, and he becomes overcome by lust and passion. And here, power is presented not with force or violence, but through vulnerability, sensuality, right? And yeah, and I think vulnerability is power, right? That the goddess of the underworld, the queen of the underworld, undresses right in front of him. And so we can maybe think about this as soft power, right? Either way, in this version of the story, Nergal is totally smitten. And so Nergal and Ereshkigal do what men and women do for 6 days and 6 nights. And on the seventh day, Nergal wakes up and he feels himself catching feelings and runs out of the underworld through the seven gates back to the land of the gods. And Ereshkigal is pissed, right? She calls Nergal the love of her delight. She screams that she didn't have enough delight yet. And Ereshkigal, who like is ruling over the underworld, right? Which is lonely business. You can't go to any parties. No one wants to hang out with you. You smell like death, right? No one ever invites you over, right? Everyone's scared of you. They see you coming and they run, right? It's a pretty lonely life. And Ereshkigal has finally found a counterpart, and she's not willing to return to a state of perpetual loneliness, and she wants Nurgle back, right? Nurgle runs and hides in the lands of the gods. Ereshkigal sends Numtar, Fate, to go and retrieve him. Namtar goes up there and he fails to recognize Nurgle. He's been hidden by the gods who have disguised him by casting a spell over him. So he returns and he tells Ereshkigal, "My lady, there's only I couldn't see him, I couldn't find him. There's only this one god who sat there bareheaded, blinking and cringing. But I don't know, it didn't really look like him because he wasn't wearing his like big hat." And Rashigel says, "Go back up there and look for the person who looks really uncomfortable, and that's the guy." And so when he is called out, when Fate returns and finds the dude who's looking like super sketchy, right? And calls him out, Nergal finds his courage and walks proudly into the underworld to accept his fate and to rule alongside of Ereshkigal, right? And so, you know, according to Jason Hawley, who did a great talk about this myth at Norwalk a couple of years ago, Mars's capacity to fight, right, can pull us into something much bigger and more transformational than what we might have expected, right, or even bargained for. And this is one of the big themes of this myth, right? As well as the Mars-Pluto opposition. Right? Mars's power to act and fight gets Mars sucked into power struggles and bigger battles that become initiatory and transformational. So in this story, right, Nergal is like, "I don't need to respect you, whatever." Right, kind of puts up a fight, which sucks him into the underworld, and then he's like, "Oh man, now I've just like been in bed for 6 days with this queen of the underworld, and like I've got to get out of here, right? I'm losing sense of who I am, right?" And the sort of this is an initiatory process, right? That he skips out on and then has to go back and complete his initiation. And it's sort of like because he picked that fight, he gets dragged into an initiation. And I think this is how Mars Pluto functions, right? That we fight something, or we are disrespectful, or we are willful, and that pulls us into a bigger battle that becomes very transformational. And we may not be ready for it, but as soon as like that fight starts, there's kind of no getting out of it. And the only way out is through, and we have to see this initiation process through, because leaving an initiation undone is never a good idea. Mm. And so in this myth, Nurgle becomes initiated into the underworld through this like standoffishness, through this willfulness. And through the and through the initiation, he comes to recognize the desires of his mind, body, his heart, and his soul. He develops the courage to accept his fate and to follow his desire and to see the initiation through. And also the courage to face the unconscious, represented by Ereshkigal in the underworld, and not to be controlled or overcome by it. Because I think this is the other thing that happens with Mars Pluto is the unconscious erupts, right, and causes us to act because it is not conscious, right? So we may find frustration or anger or rage bubbling up from the surface and causing us to take action that does not come from a conscious place, right? And the idea is to sort of integrate like the shadow material, the underworld lava, right? The land of Kur that is bubbling up and being like, okay, what is the skillful thing to do with this so that I'm not just being hijacked by it and overcome by it and overwhelmed by it, right? So that I'm not, being motivated to act at it from an unconscious place, which might cause me to fight something that pulls me into a deeper initiation, which in the end will make that information conscious, right? And this is the way that myth works, and this is the way that I think this relationship of Pluto and Mars works, right? And so, um, Ereshkigal, Queen of the Underworld, right, is the unconscious and the represents the unloved parts of ourselves that find love and compassion and acceptance, right? And so I think this is another component, and the motivation maybe comes from some of the unloved parts of ourselves that are seeking to be seen and supported, right? The lonely parts of ourselves that are looking for acceptance and partnership. This myth is also about balancing power and developing partnership. And one of the ways that this myth is talked about is that it is a symbolic coming together of two different parts of Mesopotamia, right? And the union of the north and the south of Mesopotamia. And this myth is a symbolic marriage of them, right? Um, and thinking about like how we are balancing power in ourselves, right, and the internal world and the external world, right. And so um the kind of partnership, right, is not a Martial or Plutonian concept. However, in the opposition, right, between Mars and Pluto that we are receiving this week, we are faced with the unconscious survival drives, and that's opposing our martial desires, right, and our ability to fight for what we want and our will to act. And if these forces are out of balance, we are going to act from our unconscious urges. And so if we can balance these forces within us, then we have a greater ability to act from a more empowered place. Either way, this myth helps us to understand that we need to cultivate the courage to undergo the initiation and not to run and hide from it. And yeah, that brings us to the top of the hour. So that's pretty much all I got to say. Um, just rounding things out on Saturday, January the 4th, I'll be doing a year ahead astrology forecast online with the bad pastor Lindsey Turner and Sam Reynolds. This is a Zoom event, I believe, starting at 2:30 Mountain Time. We're going to be going over all of the major transits of 2025 and breaking down the themes of the upcoming year to help you prepare for whatever 2025 has in store. And there's going to be a lot of wild stuff going on this coming year. So you might find this helpful. We're going to take it kind of month by month to give you a good outline to help you prepare and plan for the upcoming year. I'll put a link in my stories. You can also find the link in my bio. I'll put a link in the show notes on the YouTube, but it's going to be a great time. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, a lot of great astrological wisdom going to get unpacked on Saturday, January the 4th. So yeah, I hope you join us for that. And also, just so you know, that day the sun in Capricorn is going to be sextile to Saturn in Pisces. It's at 14 degrees and 50 minutes. Um, Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, and so it's a beneficial relationship, supportive and grounding, and good for getting stuff done. So there you all go. Um, yeah, cough is. Thank you, Gina Maria. The cough is much better. I was in bed like pretty much all last week, so I'm glad to be up and back with y'all. I hope to see you on Saturday for the year ahead forecast. It's also going to be recorded if you can't attend live, and that's going to be really helpful because we're going to unpack a lot of information, so you'll be able to go back and review it and rewatch it and be like, oh, damn, they was right about that. Oh my God, that's amazing. How did they do that? Um, yeah, also upcoming and incoming, coming in hot. I'm going to be teaching a 8-part class on the 7 classical planets through myth, magic, and alchemy with my partner, the beautiful and talented Marlena Seven Bremner, who is a artist and author and alchemist and pretty brilliant human being. We're going to be going over each of the 7 planets through a psychological, mythological, astrological, and alchemical lens, giving you a deep dive into the archetype. And then we have an 8th class for integration. That's going to be starting March 1st. There is a early bird discount if you sign up by January the 20th, and patrons will get an extra discount on top of that. I'll make them post on Patreon pretty shortly. So if you're interested in learning more about astrology, mythology, alchemy, whatever, or just the archetypes of the planets, check it out. It's a great class. We taught it last year. I think everybody really loved it. I had a wonderful time. I'm super excited to teach it again. Again, that's starting March 1st, and there is an early bird discount if you sign up by January the 20th. And yeah, that is all the astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in for another week in space. Oh, what's up, Seven? Seven says you can sign up at marlena7bremner.com. I will put, we'll be posting about that shortly. There's a link in my bio. I will put a link in the show notes on the YouTube. And once I get around to making posts on Instagram again, which is like the last part of my recovery process, um, uh, I will be putting stuff in my stories. But yeah, check that out. It's going to be a great time. It's a great way to learn more about astrology and to work with the planets on a more kind of animist level. And we talk a lot about planetary magic and ways of connecting with the planetary energies and cultivating relationships with them. So good times abound. All right, my friends, thanks for riding along with me through another week in space. I wish you all a very happy new year and an excellent 2025. I will see you next week. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. And until then, be well, my friends. And as always, may the force be with you. See you. Bye.